sequences that fold and form functional proteins are. And the number was 1 in 10 to the 77th power. So 1 in 1,000 trillion, 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 trillion is the number. And that's published in Journal of Molecular Biology. And when that paper came out, I thought, this is the end of Darwinism, because there haven't been nearly that many organisms on planet Earth, ever. And so if you say something's that rare, you're saying it can't be found. Not by the kind of search that Darwin did. But, so I thought, as soon as people read this, but they just don't read it. So they read it and they ignore it. So I came to learn how spiritual this subject is. And people are not holding to it for scientific reasons or rational reasons. They're holding to it for political or spiritual reasons. There's a strong hold. And so that made me think, oh, that means this is going to take longer than I thought. Because this is going to be about speaking the truth to a bunch of people who don't want to hear the truth and trying to find the best ways to speak under those circumstances. So it's more like, it's more like a prophet like Jeremiah going to people who don't want to hear what he's saying than it is like proving something and then having everyone acknowledge the truth. So, how did I end up at Biola? We went from the UK to, I started a nonprofit, 501c3 up in Seattle, and then I started consulting. I was asked to consult with Biola on the Stewart Science Honors Program. And when I started doing that, I was meeting people at Biola, and I was meeting with the president there and the provost there, and I thought, the work that I'm trying to do with my lab up in Seattle, it'd be better to be here, because there's so many people here at Biola. And one of our daughters came to Biola and did engineering physics. She's now at USC, finishing her 3-2 program, working for JPL. And they're fighting over her now. Lockheed Martin and JPL are fighting over her right now. This is my daughter. So when she came down, I said, I'd like to work down here. And so I started the dialogue with them at Biola, and they said, yeah, let's have you down here. So I love it, because I get to do more research than most people at Biola. I teach one course that I made that's kind of based off of the experience that went into the book. And so the students read parts of the book, but the course is called The Design of Life. And we talk about some of the things that we talked about today and lots more. And I'm giving upper division biology students a distinctly Christian understanding of their discipline of biology. But then I also do a version of it that's a little bit shorter for non-science majors. So there's CMA, film majors and biblical studies majors and history majors, and I'm giving them a snapshot of life that just makes light bulbs turn on. It's a lot of fun. So that's what landed me here, and I love being here. Good question. Anything else? Yes.
What are some practical applications for this information that we learned for people like us who haven't studied as much as you, who don't have biology degrees?
Great question. So a key practical application is, and it's there's a chapter in the book called A Dose of Common Science. And the whole point of that chapter, I think it's chapter 5, is you don't need to be an expert to be able to understand some basic things that allow you to engage people who are claiming that your faith is baseless. So if you have friends who are agnostics or atheists or maybe Buddhists or Muslims, I think there are things that you can be very, very confident of, that you don't need a PhD, and you can do simple arguments that say, here's why I think this is true, and here's why I want to challenge what you're saying. So, and I gave pieces of that here. So some of this, but the book is a lot more, and the course that I teach I give my students a lot of ways to argue that don't require you to be an expert. And so the spring term, which is right now, none of my students are science majors. And I'm giving them the arguments because I say, you don't need to be a science major to do this. You can actually understand this. So from today's, this simple idea that when you look at life, it has lots of aspects to it that don't fit the Darwinian school. You know, and you might have a friend who is a Darwinist, and they've never thought of that before. They've never been challenged on that before. You'll be surprised in dialogue that they really haven't thought through these things. They're a Darwinist just because they were taught to be that, and they've never had it challenged. Good question. Any other? Yeah.
What are your thoughts on theistic evolution?
Yeah, great question. So theistic evolution is the idea that one can be a Christian, or even, I think a lot of them would say, an Orthodox Christian, but also accept Darwin's theory. And the sort of the 50,000-foot view, that would be, they would say, yes, Darwin's mechanism works to explain the branching, but that just means that it's God's design to put that in place to create life. I think it goes badly wrong in all kinds of ways. But there's two ways you could go with this. One is, everything that I said about Darwinism being wrong means, why would you, as a Christian, why would you say we should accept a wrong theory? Okay, so that's the scientific critique of theistic evolution is the same as the scientific critique of evolution. And that is, it just is bad science. There's a doctrinal or theological one, which is, where does doctrine go wrong if we accept Darwinism? And I don't have time to unpack all of that, but you can see a lot of key things that go wrong are our understanding of humanity, our understanding of the fall, because the key parts of the gospel, the beginning of the gospel is, who is God, who are we, and what state are we in? So it's Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Genesis 3 is the fall. If you don't have that in place correctly, then Messiah coming and becoming the substitutionary atonement for us, none of that makes sense, because you messed up on the first three parts. And not only that, for God, the Son, to become man, gets really messed up if you've messed up your version of what man is. So it gets messed up in all kinds of ways. So there are Christians out there, and I'm not denying as a Christian, who think that there was no Adam and Eve, there was no original man and woman for humanity, that instead there was a hominid population that was never smaller than tens or hundreds of thousands. And out of that population, God chose and anointed a man and a woman and called them Adam and Eve. Well, that's not what Scripture says. And it really messes up the notion of we're in a fallen state because we descend from those two people. And if you say, well, actually there was a population, well, does that mean some of us are in a fallen state, or some of us aren't, or some of us have...